Substantiate, to establish by proof or competent evidence. Welcome back to Substantiate. I'm the host, William Glasser, bringing you hypothetical sports matchups every single week. I am William Glasser, the host of Substantiate, and I am back here with another episode, just like every week. And this week I have two great and special guests, which we'll get to in just a couple minutes. But first, a couple announcements to new listeners and returning listeners. So again, as always, make sure to follow us at substantiatepod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We haven't gotten as much engagement with Facebook, so we're going to be prioritizing Instagram and Twitter, where we're seeing a little bit more engagement, just to try to grow the podcast. And you can also subscribe to our email list, linked down in the show notes. And another great way to help us and promote the podcast is just to tell your friends or someone else that you think might be interested in it, and that helps us out a ton. If every listener got one of their friends to listen to the podcast, then our audience would double. So if you could do that, that would really be great, and it would help grow the show. And just like I told you last week, I am running a giveaway for 2 invitations to the app Clubhouse. We will have 2 winners, again linked to that down in the show notes. And so the guests this week are Hung and Chee from Amazing Race season 32. They are great. They were really energetic. They brought a lot of great points to the conversation. And this was a really fun episode to record and edit, and I hope you'll enjoy it. So this is an official spoiler warning if you have not seen Amazing Race Season 32. We will be talking about that a bit, and they will be talking about their experiences a bit, besides just characters from Hamilton as contestants on The Amazing Race. So if you are still interested in watching that, then go watch that before listening to this. But if you don't think you're ever going to watch it, then just keep on listening. And I think you'll still really like this episode if you're interested in Hamilton. And we open up with a little bit about the race and their experiences. I ask them just a couple questions. So if you have not watched it, then you get to know them a little bit, add a bit of context. And then we get into the characters from Hamilton on The Amazing Race. And yeah, again, like I said before, it was a great episode. They were great guests. And last quick thing, so sorry about my mic quality in this. I'm not sure exactly what happened when I was editing and mixing and mastering this episode. I did a pretty good job making it better than the original, but it's definitely not great, but hopefully whatever happened won't happen again. Anyway, it's not that bad. And again, Super Bowl coverage coming next week. I got a guest all lined up, talking Super Bowl, talking Tampa Buccaneers all season, talking Tampa Bay and Tom Brady, or Champa Bay. And anyway, come back next week, next Wednesday. We are going to have an NFL episode, and that will kind of wrap up that little series, I guess you could call it, of NFL playoffs. But let's just throw it to this conversation with Hung and Chee. Today I'm joined by Hung and Chee from The Amazing Race, Season 32. Today we are going to be talking about what if characters in the musical Hamilton were contestants on The Amazing Race. To anyone that has not watched The Amazing Race, you can watch all 32 seasons on CBS All Access and get all caught up if you want to do that before listening. So this is an official spoiler warning. And I just wanted to start today's episode by getting to know you guys a little bit. So first off, you two placed second out of 11 teams on The Amazing Race. And you guys were part of the My 5 Alliance. So in many ways, you revolutionized the way the game was played, changing a lot of the social aspect to the game. What part did you have in the creation of the Alliance?
So before we jump into that, I wanted to just say, first of all, thank you for having us on your podcast. This is super cool. And it's a pleasure to get to know you. And I think like the whole idea behind Substantiate is super cool. So kudos to that. And so then to answer your question about the Alliance, I think that the unique thing about this season was that the editors and producers made the Alliances a really big deal, a really core part of the storyline. But if you look back to previous seasons, almost all seasons had some sort of alliance. It just wasn't made into such a big deal. So I think that that's the first thing that I would want to say. So the existence of alliances is not particularly new. I think that how the alliance played out was different than other seasons too. And I don't mean the Mind 5 part, which I think was made a bigger deal than it actually was in real life. But I think that the final Secret Alliance, I think that's what it was called, was actually pretty deep and ran throughout the whole race, but it wasn't always so obvious.
Yeah, you guys were a very core three, and it's very impressive that you all made it to the finals because, when I think of alliances, whether it's some smaller ones in previous seasons of The Amazing Race or whether it's in Survivor, rarely are they that successful, and that was very impressive.
Yeah, no, I mean, luck does play a role in the race, and so things had to fall our way, but you're right. I mean, it's rare for our alliance to do as well as it did, but I think it speaks to, the strength of the teams that were in the alliance. And, we had some fortunate moments where we were all together at the same task to even have the opportunity to work together, so I think all those things made a difference.
Yep. And so what were some of the most challenging challenges, whether it's a roadblock or a detour, or the mega leg or any of those special challenges for you, either as a team or individually?
As a team, we did something that most teams don't often do, which is switch detours. So we did it 3 times. So clearly those were the ones that we didn't think that we were getting very good at very quickly. So I would say that those were the most challenging ones for us as a team.
Yeah. And then for me individually, the one that comes to mind is the tile roadblock in Cambodia. I struggled on that one because I didn't watch the full demonstration the whole way through. And so
that's the one you struggled with the most? That's the roadblock you struggled with the most?
What else am I missing?
The baby.
Oh my God. I've already blocked that from my memory because it was that traumatic. But yes, the baby one was also a tough one to deal with.
Yep, and you guys started fresh out of the gate, coming in first place in your first 2 legs and second place in the third leg, and then eventually, stuck with your alliance and made it to the finals. So what did you feel because you were able to get to the finals with a group that you were so close with?
Yeah, for me, it was just a sense of joy and accomplishment because Hung and I's goal from the very beginning was just to make it to the final leg. And so to be able to do it with 2 teams that we ended up getting pretty close with just at a friendship level just made it more special.
Yeah, and I read that this was filmed towards the end of 2018. So as the time we're recording this, it's already 2021. That was more than 2 years ago. So what was it like to have to keep quiet about it because you guys had such a successful race for 2 years?
For me, it was tough to keep that secret at first. Like the first maybe 3-4 weeks after coming back home, I was still having dreams about the race and, replaying different moments, and Hung and I would, talk about, what we could have done different and stuff like that. So it was really tough because we had no one else to really talk about it with other than each other. We also have a big like WhatsApp group with, with the whole cast. And so we're able to trade stories with them, but it was certainly tough not being able to share it with like our friends or our family. The 2-year wait was pretty long, but thankfully, finally aired.
And it was really surreal actually, because, you did this life-changing thing, but you don't have and particularly in our digital world, no pictures, no, nothing, no evidence. So what was it was it real? Was it not real?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that weirdness of it. There's also the 2 years allowed us to process lots of things, and also with ourselves and also with the other racers too. And we got really close with the other racers. And the third thing that's probably the most unexpected because of the 2 years is all of our friends and family that we didn't tell were then a little bit peeved that you guys did this. You guys disappeared for 5 weeks. We didn't know about it. You didn't tell us. And so there's that piece of it too. But it's aired. It's real. So
yeah.
And would you guys ever go back and race again?
Absolutely.
Hands down.
The one thing I'll say is I'm very impressed by you being able to jump off the bridge in New Orleans in the final leg.
So you're not into heights, Will?
Yeah, no, not really.
When you're so focused and you're so competitive and you're so focused on a task, right? Then fear all goes away because you're so channeled into that one thing. And at that moment, there wasn't room for fear because I just needed to get that clue on the first try. Like I would waste so much time if I did it,
Yeah. Again, very impressive. And then one last sort of random question. What is one thing you'd be really disappointed about if you never got to experience?
Like on the race, what we experienced?
Anything in life.
Oh, anything in life?
Oh, man. I would say, parenthood is probably up there, to not be able to experience that. I mean, we've got 3 daughters who fulfill so many things in our life, and that would be tough to miss out on.
Yeah, I'm grateful for so many things in my life. And so any of them would cause regret. But I think that the biggest thing if we didn't have, or if didn't happen, would be our children, them just being healthy,
Or meeting you.
That's true, because that's a
That's a prerequisite, yeah.
For the kids, for these kids,
Yes.
other kids, with other women.
Yes. And you could have other kids with other women too.
Indeed.
Anyway, getting back on to today's topic, what if characters from Hamilton were contestants on The Amazing Race? So, obviously, Hamilton is a musical, very famous for its music. So what were your guys' favorite songs?
Oh, man. My favorite is Satisfied.
Quick timeout to let you know what Chicago 2 years ago? Year and a half?
2019.
Yeah,
year and a half ago.
But a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
So Chee is definitely the expert on Hamilton, and I'm just kind of the backseat driver.
The tag along.
Yeah.
Yeah. I started listening to the soundtrack like in 2015, and never went to the Broadway show, but people kept talking about it. It was in the press, and I was like, all right, I'll see what this is about. And I was hooked. And so I listened to the soundtrack like dozens of times.
I think Satisfied is probably my favorite too.
I mean, there's so many good, like the opening theme song is also just like completely just grabs you. My Shot is just like this lyrical, like intense boom in your face song.
And all the different layers of it, having so many different people singing so many different things all at one time. It makes a really interesting dynamic.
Yeah. Oh, Battle of Yorktown, like the climax at the end, like that is just adrenaline pumping right there.
And I think it's a favorite for for different reasons, right? There's some like that are very emotional, some that are really intense and exciting. And then of course there's King George, right? Like he's hilarious.
Yeah, he was like awesome comic relief.
Yeah. I mean, when you see it in the theater, you can't always see their facial expressions.
Yeah.
But when you watch it on Disney Plus and
in the spit.
Yes.
Yeah, he's like spitting all over. And then also, when he's walking on and he makes these looks and very snarky and
no, it adds so much. Yeah, the Disney Plus version is wonderful because you miss all that, when you're seeing it live and you're in the back seats. So that was really fun to watch.
So we're going to get into each of our 6 teams that are going to be competing in today's race. So team number 1 is George Washington and Alexander Hamilton. The general in the Continental Army teamed up with his right-hand man.
Mm-hmm.
And then team 2, we have the ultimate duo, the Schuyler sisters, Angelica and Eliza, but we left Peggy out of this one. Team number 3 is the 3rd Vice President of the United States of America, but you know him in your history textbooks as the man that shot and killed Hamilton. But that's Aaron Burr, and he's going to be partnered with John Adams. Then team number 4 is the man that wrote the Declaration of Independence, the man that resided in Monticello, Thomas Jefferson, and he's going to be partnered with his political ally, James Madison. Team number 5, we have the best friends, John Lawrence and Marquis de Lafayette. And team 6, we have King George III and Samuel Seabury. So to see a full list of these teams, either scroll down and look in the show notes or go to our Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter accounts at substantiatepod. So we have these 6 teams here, and all of them are going to have different strengths and weaknesses in the Amazing Race. And although part of the Amazing Race is luck, which taxi driver do you get, or that kind of thing, which challenge you pick, but also there are certain strengths and weaknesses that will either help or hurt them in the game. So out of those 6 teams, what are some strengths, weaknesses, and other stuff that stand out to you?
Yeah. So we'll go through each of the number teams and say strengths and weaknesses, and then we'll just eliminate them. Take it away, Chee.
All right, team number 1, Washington and Hamilton. So I think this team's strengths are that they would be very confident and decisive in their racing approach.
But on the flip side, their weaknesses is going to be stubbornness.
Exactly.
And not being able to communicate with each other. Like Hamilton has issues listening to anybody.
Exactly.
Right?
So if Hamilton is stacking watermelons incorrectly and Washington's trying to give him like feedback, like that's going to be a long drawn out argument.
Or if they're having issues in Kazakhstan counting spears, they're never going to switch.
Yeah.
Right. Or if they're having issues in any of the ones that we struggled with, they wouldn't switch and they would just stay there.
Yes. They would not have the humility, is that the word I'm looking for, to switch detours?
So. Well, one other thing is that, towards the beginning of the war, Washington retreats in the north. And so maybe he does know when to switch challenges, realizing that he's outnumbered, outmanned, outplanned.
I think so. I think Washington would not be the weaker link. I think Hamilton's impulsiveness
and stubbornness.
Yeah.
Hamilton would be the one that Washington would have trouble convincing to switch detours.
Go to number 2.
Yeah. Eliza and Angelica. I actually think this would be a very formidable team because Angelica, you have like the fierce competitor that's like unafraid of any situation and any opponent. And then with Eliza, I feel like you've got like a complementary type of personality who knows her sister very well, but can stand up to her if needed.
I think Eliza and Angelica's strength is the fact that they know each other and can communicate really well.
Yeah.
I also think that they are, because of their status, would have musical training, dancing training. They would have all of these bits.
Yeah, that's a good point.
They also are probably detail-oriented. And Angelica seems very, very competitive and fierce and wants to win.
Yeah. A potential weakness of theirs is any brute strength type of challenges they might struggle with. But with Angelica's fierceness and competitiveness, though, I don't know, if that would impact her that much.
Yeah, and they for sure would be strong enough to get into the finals. So if it was our finals, brute strength wasn't an issue.
Wasn't an issue, yeah. In fact, I don't think there was that many brute strength things on our entire season. Yeah, the watermelons, but...
Yeah, seeing D'Angelo and Gary just basically throwing them at the beginning of that challenge, that was incredible. To anyone that's ever held a watermelon before, you're like, he's just throwing that like it's a football.
Nerf ball, yeah, not even a full football.
I'm glad you bring that up, Will. I think that's something that was unappreciated or unrecognized with Hung. Like, she was the one tossing all the watermelons to me, and she too was handling it like it was nothing. But those things were heavy.
Yeah, and that was probably like a couple hundred of them.
Yeah,
we did the math. Wasn't it like 386 or something like that?
And D'Angelo and Gary are much stronger than us, but that didn't help them do it faster. So I think that, on face, people might underestimate them because it's a woman team, but I think that they
they would be a very
tough. And also in that challenge specifically was very detail oriented, because the watermelon isn't a perfect sphere. It's more like an oval. So which way you put it did matter. And that was something that you guys realized, and Gary and D'Angelo had a little more trouble with.
But they probably would have just done the bottle dancing because they're trained in other fancy dancing that
they would
have
crushed the bottle balancing.
Okay, 13.
Aaron Burr and John Adams. John Adams, he didn't get much of a role. He wasn't featured much in the play, but I believe he was a severely overweight individual, and I think that would work against him big time, especially when you think about like the mega leg in India when we ran like 9 miles cumulative, or in the Philippines when we were running around the entire city. That would be a downfall for them.
Yeah, it'd be very difficult.
Yeah, John Adams weighed 150 pounds. Not sure how tall he was.
150 isn't that big.
John Adams, is that small?
He was 5'7". Interesting.
I have him here as 203 pounds.
But that's John Quincy.
Oh, yeah, that's his son. They came up with very creative names back then. Well, my name was John Adams, so I'm going to name my kid John Quincy Adams.
No, so he's just short. He's not fat, Chee.
Huh. Wonder why Lin-Manuel referenced him as being fat.
Well, he says "sit down, John," which is a reference to 1776.
Anyways, assuming
I think he just it was just an adjective to
just a random insult.
Yeah, I don't think that he.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's his son that was actually the fat one. Okay, focus.
Aaron Burr, he's a competitive dude. I think he, that would, serve him well, right? I'm trying to think other aspects of his personality.
Well, thinking about agree to disagree on something, like whether it's picking which detour to choose, he literally dueled Hamilton and wound up killing him just because they disagreed politically, and it escalated to the point where they were like, all right, let's just shoot each other.
Yeah, he holds a grudge, doesn't he? In addition to disagreeing politically, I think he blamed Hamilton for all of his failures, right? And so that would make him a pretty poor teammate. That's for sure. Yeah, this team wouldn't do very well.
Just because you don't like them?
No, because of all the things I just said about Burr.
All right.
And, potentially John Adams being kind of fat.
He's just short.
Yeah.
Next.
All right, team 4 is Jefferson and Madison. Is that right, Will?
Yes.
Yeah, let's see.
Madison is sick.
Yeah, so again, that's going to be tough for him to overcome.
Yeah, cardio would be rough.
Yeah, Madison was the short one, the really short one. I'm pretty sure he was 5'4".
Oh.
Yeah. But awesome. Hung was 5 feet. Hung's 5'0", so yeah.
Thanks.
and she crushed it, so no worries on the height for Mr. Madison there.
But the asthma or whatever respiratory disease he had.
So with Jefferson, this is interesting because Jefferson could speak French fluently, right?
Okay, so he's fancy.
Yeah. But what was interesting for our season is, I mean, let me back up. You would think that being able to speak a second language would be an advantage on the race.
And it is.
And, normally it is because you can navigate, you can communicate with locals, you can understand street signs.
And it helped Riley with Italian and Spanish and all of the Spanish and Italian and Portuguese speaking places, remember.
That is true. But at the same time, for our season, we had this like weird language curse that we called it, where people that could speak the local language always seems to get eliminated in that leg. So for example, like Kelly, one of the Olympic hurdlers, is fluent in Spanish, and Lavon is too. And yet they get eliminated in Colombia, which speaks Spanish.
But I think that you're confusing like correlation with causation, because their language skills isn't the reason why they got eliminated.
Yeah, but still, it's just, a random curse.
To point out. Like, it just seems to be this like weird coincidence that happened like more than multiple times. Or like Michelle, the Cajun Asians, she's fluent in French.
Yeah, but they were starting to speak French in Spanish-speaking countries. Like to the taxi drivers, merci.
They
merci.
were. Yeah. And then you had Leo, who's fluent in Russian, getting eliminated in Kazakhstan, where many people speak Russian there. So it was weird. But Hung is absolutely right. That had nothing to do with why they got eliminated, but we still like to call it a curse.
So
anyway,
you want Jefferson to stay out of any French-speaking countries?
Basically, he's not allowed to go to France or Montreal.
There's countries that speak French.
And all the other
I don't know. Is the Amazing Race been to Canada? Because if they have, not often.
I don't know if they have.
So Amazing Race Family Edition did go to Toronto.
Oh,
that was like season 7 or 8.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A good question. I mean, obviously the Amazing Race Canada.
Yeah.
But I don't know about the US version other than the Family Edition.
Yeah. That was still Jefferson and Madison. So then if you look on to team number 5, you have John Lawrence and Lafayette. Well, Lafayette was also fluent in French.
He sure was.
From France.
Yep. He also seemed like a really badass dude. He took over for Charles Lee
Lafayette
in that one battle where they what's the lyrics? Snapped a stalemate from the jaws of defeat. So that's pretty good, not bad.
He was a key part in the Battle of Yorktown and the lead up to it.
Yep. And then John Lawrence
had nice pants.
He had nice pants. Or
wasn't that him?
Let's see. How'd the lyrics go? Lawrence, I like you a lot. I don't know. Can't remember.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
From my shot.
No, because a lot rhymed with shot. So I'm not sure how much there was between it.
I think your pants look hot.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and then Lawrence eventually ends up dying attempting to free slaves. At least that's how it is in the show. So, they might be a team that's maybe looking to help other teams more also.
That's a good point. I think they would be a good team because at least in the show, they had a good connection with each other, and so presumably they'd be able to work well together.
Yeah, best friends. And then Team 6, which is kind of just a funny team. So we have King George III and Samuel Seabury. And in Samuel Seabury, he's the one he's a loyalist, and he speaks out against the Continental Congress. So although they didn't really have a connection, they both stood for the same things. And obviously this team is probably the most different than all of the others because King George is probably the funniest character in the show. And his whole, like we were saying before, with what you can see when you watch it on Disney Plus and all the facial expressions, is he just gonna overreact and go crazy?
I think so. And also in terms of like, emotional instability, that's one piece. He's so well entitled, he'll just refuse to do things. He'll just take penalties.
Exactly.
He'll say, I'm not going to go down that building face first. I'm just going to take the penalty.
Yep.
And
I'm not going to wear that chicken costume because I'm above that, right?
I'll take the penalty.
Yeah. They're going to be the first team out without a doubt.
Yep. All right. So, yeah, like when you just throw them in there, they're just so much different than everyone else here. Like the whole show, when you watch it, so much of it is dark and a shade of brown or something, or dark clothes, most of it. And then he just pops out there wearing all his red, his jewels, all that kind of stuff, the crown, much of an outlier. All right, so now we're on to, I guess you could call it leg 2, if there's just 5 teams left now, with King George and Samuel Seabury being eliminated. So which team might be the luckiest and maybe catch a non-elimination leg, or maybe catch 2 non-elimination legs like Kaylin and Haley?
I think Jefferson and Madison are going to get lucky and catch a non-elimination leg because Madison's inability to just keep up, or maybe needing medical attention along the way, might slow him down.
Now, I remember one season, I forget their names. I want to say it was Connor and David. It was a father and son duo. Yeah, and the father like broke his foot, I think, and they went on deep, and then they came back again and won it in their second season. Yeah, so if they're catching a break here, then who else? So if they're the lucky ones, then who's the unlucky ones here?
Well, Lawrence might be the unlucky one. He ends up dying in the show, which is unlucky. So that may be a bad sign for him on the race.
Yeah. In one other thing that I recognize with Lafayette is that after his part in the American Revolution, he goes back and is a big he plays a large role in the French Revolution. So, he's in the French Revolution, that would be much longer than just one musical, but it's very long. He was very persistent fighting until he eventually died, basically. So, there's some different things. So, they definitely be trying to fight against any things that wouldn't fall their way. But ultimately, someone's got to go.
Yeah.
All right. So now we're down to 4 teams left. There is George Washington and Hamilton, Angelica and Eliza. There is Burr and John Adams. And there is Thomas Jefferson and James Madison.
I'm going to say Burr and Adams go next. One, because Adams is potentially fat, and so we'll slow them down. And Burr will get mad at Adams for being fat and slow, and will hold that grudge and will not let it go, and will kill John Adams for that reason.
Oh, yikes. So now there's murder on the race.
Oh, yes.
The drama increases.
Yes.
That would be a first for Amazing Race,
yeah.
the wholesome family show.
Yeah.
First that we know of.
Is that the final 3 then?
Yeah, so just George Washington, Angelica and Eliza, and James Madison and Thomas Jefferson. So usually it's in the final leg. In your season, it happened to be in the second to last leg where there was a memory challenge. So out of everywhere that they go in this race, who might have the best memory? In your case, was relating music to countries that they were in. And, sometimes it's what's the name of the currency or a language. And so who do you think will be good or bad in that type of challenge?
Man, you got a lot of smart folks in this final 3.
Well, this one, travel will help you. So this one, knowing a different language could help you. So, a lot, Angelica spent a lot of time overseas in Europe, and
yeah, and I'm sure,
so did Jefferson.
Would Washington and Hamilton be good at reading the clue? Maybe they, trip up and they don't read the clue.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think Eliza and Angelica would be most likely to read the clue and stay calm and think about, hey, maybe we need to, order the flags based on the order of the race,
Yep.
not on the order of the song. And I'm going to have to pick Angelica and Eliza on this one.
Yeah, if that was the final task, I think, Angelica with her, Eliza's the younger sister.
Yeah.
Eliza, with her piano skills, would do really well.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just seem like such a strong duo together. They seem like they'd get along super well together.
Yep.
And Angelica basically gave Eliza Hamilton to be her husband. So a selfless team. And so what about, like we mentioned, you Hung being fearless and jumping off a bridge? Usually use that in an example of when not to follow someone, but there you are doing it. And so height and climbing down a building, facing down while having to look for letters and eventually figuring out that it says sauerkraut. But height is a big factor here. And which of these people do you think might be most out of their comfort zone with a height challenge?
It would be probably somebody who is the most emotionally unstable. So who would that be? Who is the most explosive, excitable?
And we're still talking just the final three teams here?
Yeah. Is it Hamilton?
I'd say Hamilton then.
Yeah, I mean, in your season, no one really had too many problems with height, but yeah, I mean, the only thing with Hamilton is that he's also a fearless guy. That George Washington basically has to convince him not to be a martyr. He has to convince him to not put everything on the line. So in some ways, I'm thinking that maybe Hamilton is, he just might be willing to put himself before Washington, in terms of whether it's, rappelling down a bridge, jumping off a bridge, or rappelling down a building. But yeah, I mean, like any of those people, I'm not sure that they had bungee jumping back in the 1700s, but yeah, that could definitely be a factor. So were there any other parts of the game, elements of the game that we haven't really mentioned with this group of teams?
Yeah, actually. In the beginning, you asked us a little bit about the alliance.
Yep.
And I think that usually when people watch The Amazing Race, they're most focused on the travel piece, the difficulties there, or the actual challenges. But there's a big part of the race, which is the social game. And it's very clear on reality shows like Survivor or Big Brother, but on, again, race, it is a part that's just not emphasized in the telling of the story unless it becomes somebody's, downfall. So that could potentially be something that impacts the race. Because of Hamilton and Burr's incredible hate for each other, they could create alliances not to help other people, but just to take out one of the other.
Their enemies.
Their enemy, yeah. So that could have, changed the game. And maybe if Burr was successful, then Hamilton, would not have made it to the finals because he was, U-turned or,
or shot.
Or shot. So that's a piece that we haven't talked about with these
That's a good point.
Characters.
Yep.
Or King George. People would just target him and eliminate him first.
Yeah, there's different levels of dysfunctional in teams, but a lot of times some of the more dysfunctional teams make it to towards the middle of the game. But when you look at King George, like that's just a whole nother level. I don't even think he's getting on the plane out of LA. Like,
oh, no way.
He doesn't fly commercial.
He doesn't fly commercial, and he has to sleep in like 5-star hotels, right? Whereas, whereas for us, we were sleeping on the floor in cold airports, and that's something he would just refuse to do.
That is true. Giving ourselves mini showers in the bathroom of airports to kind of smell reasonably okay.
Oh, yeah. Well, did you ever get any reactions on any of the planes while you're in close quarters?
I think people are generally polite, and no, we didn't, but we don't know. Maybe we did. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, we stunk. All of the racers as a collective. We just were one disgusting, rotting group, because in France, if you remember the chantilly cream that they threw at us, the cream got into every single fiber of our clothes, in our hair, in the crevices of our bodies, and it rotted, right? Because we don't have, modern day Whirlpool washing machines. We're washing our clothes in the sinks of hotel rooms, and we're not really getting it all out. And we smell. We know we smell.
The backpack got on the backpack, and that stunk it up too.
In case you want to know what it smelled like, we all smelled like rotting baby vomit. If you've had the pleasure to smell that.
I guess fortunately for myself, I have not.
Well, it's maybe something to look forward to.
Yes.
Yeah. So any of the other conditions, though, that smell, but I'm sure that by the end of the race, sitting on planes was probably not that fun. But by the time that you're flying back from the Philippines to New Orleans, and you get that bit of an upgrade into first class for the flight back home, and how much was that refreshing in a way, just like to be on a plane still, but to be able to get maybe a bit of rest, to not be cooped up in a little chair for almost half a day?
For me, it was incredible. Not just for kind of the luxuries of being able to recline and eat the fancier food, but it was also a way to kind of like celebrate the fact that we made it to the final leg. And so that was like all of that put together, it just made it so awesome for me.
Yeah, and I know from listening to Gary and Angelo's podcast that by that point in the final leg, you put the friendships aside and it was an individual game. But on that last plane ride, was there any interaction between teams of, like you said, maybe a bit of celebrating, or was it just a relief?
No, we were still celebrating together until we left the New Orleans Louis Armstrong Airport, because we were still hanging out in the lounge in Manila, eating together, hanging out. Even in the layover,
in Los Angeles,
we were still hanging out and chatting. And we were even chatting in the airport in the New Orleans airport before they released us. And it was when we released that,
it was every man for themselves.
It was like game night, right? And you're just playing the hardest that you can for your team.
Yeah. And one other new thing in your season was to be able to delay a team, to be able to yield them for either 10 or 20 minutes. So when you first got to the cave, where you either had to find 10 or 20 minute hourglasses, what was your strategy kind of just after reading the clue and going in?
So our immediate strategy was that we would just grab any hourglass and then go sign our name up, because the difference between a 10 and 20 minute yield is just 10 minutes that you may or may not use.
Yeah.
But the difference between the two flights was 30 minutes that you for sure would have an advantage on.
Yeah.
So we definitely knew that we were going to grab one and then go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a very literal take on it and a very intelligent take. So then the way that it ends up being used, the yields and the U-turns, who do we think is going to get U-turned? Who is going to get yielded? So first, they'll have to make it far enough into the race in order to have that happen to them. So, even if everyone hates King George, he may not make it far enough. But so who's going to have maybe the worst social game?
I think Burr and Hamilton.
Yeah.
So just whoever gets there first.
Yeah, Jefferson, they fought too. Jefferson and Hamilton fought.
Yeah. Hamilton is going to be fighting and U-turning Burr and Jefferson all day long, or yielding them all day long, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Man, both the Burr-Adams team and the Jefferson-Madison team
would team up against.
All of them would team up against Hamilton.
Yeah.
And now one thing I'm thinking of in the Hamilton-Washington team is, okay, so you're in the cave, either go for that 10 or 20 minutes. And I feel like Hamilton's going to be going for that 20 and Washington's going to be more logistical and be like, what are you doing? We can take the quick 30. It's just one other thing that they might explode over.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Hamilton's going to get greedy. He wants both the earlier departure time and the 20-minute yield.
Yeah, and ultimately his luck has to end somewhere, which it did.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts before we sign off this evening?
No, this was fun.
This was very entertaining.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you guys for coming on tonight and being great guests.
Absolutely, anytime.
And yeah, that was Hung and Chee. They were great, and just make sure to check out all the links in the description. There are the Clubhouse Giveaway, sign up for the email list, or follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all of those down in the show notes. Check those out, and yeah, just share the podcast with a friend if you can, and we'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of Substantiate. The best way to help support the show is to, number one, tell your friends about Substantiate. That is the number one way to support us. The second way is to leave us a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. Number 3, follow us at substantiatepod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Hello, I'm Anthony.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
And we're hosts of Capes on the Couch, the podcast where comics get counseling.
Superheroes don't always get to go home happy. That's where we come in.
We offer psychiatric and mental health analysis of comic book characters.
So check us out at capesonthecouch.live and across all social media platforms at Capes on the Couch.